everyone. We welcome you to our 12th annual meeting for Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank. My name is Anita Hagan, and I am the Executive Director for your organization. We are excited to host this virtual event for you and look forward to a very informative evening together. First off, I would like to thank the Hamilton County Community Foundation. We're setting this up here at their collaboration hub in Fishers, and I really encourage you to come see this place. It's awesome. Healthy food access for all in Hamilton County. We know that you are joining us this evening because you have a passion for wanting to learn more and want to participate in making healthy food access a reality for all of the 361,000 individuals who claim Hamilton County is home. That is truly our mission at the food bank also, and we are excited to explore this with our speakers tonight. But however, before we get started, I want to share a brief review of the food bank's past year. We were blessed once again to serve Hamilton County, and through the community's overwhelming support, we provided food for 115,815 meals, all for families and children in our community. This is a new one-year record. Our role as support for the pantries and meal programs continues to deepen. We operate in the background. We want to allow you at the pantries and meal programs to concentrate first and foremost on the families and children who come to you for help. In 2021, community networking support was crucial as we all went through this second year of pandemic together. The public listing of Hamilton County Food Pantries for All that shares key program information continues to be sent out across all of Hamilton County. This ability to easily find food assistance through our county's network was expanded this year to include the Community Compass app, as Hamilton County Food Pantries were included as one of the very first counties outside of Marion on the app. Community Compass was developed and is administered by the Indy Hunger Network. We thank them very much for their help. The food bank also worked alongside a dedicated countywide team to launch the first Hamilton County Hunger Walk. This culminated in $9,300+ raised to help 8 partners all across our county. Please watch for more exciting news as we all work together to help partners in our pantries in the network. Look for this year's October the 8th, 2022, Hamilton County Hunger Run Walk at Dillon Park in Noblesville. Through these initiatives and many more, we continue to see the development and importance of the food support network in our county, combining resources, searching for community-driven solutions, and most importantly, working together. We look forward to hearing much more as the Hamilton County Food Resource Plan is presented here tonight. The food bank continues its emphasis on always providing healthy staples year-round to fill the shelves and refrigerators and freezers of the county's network. This is done through numerous donations and also many food purchases. In this last fiscal year, food purchases accounted for 37% of our total food distributions. That's by pounds. It's even more by dollars. And these purchases will continue as needed. All monetary donations, marked food purchases, and much more make sure we can continue to provide all of the healthy staples distributed year-round. Our 2021 holiday season was Help Us Fill the Barrel with 33,333 meals. Why that number? Well, that translates to 40,000 pounds. 1.2 pounds equals a meal. Well, by the end of January, Hamilton County had helped us to far exceed this goal by providing 37,300 meals. It was such a blessing to start 2022 with an overflowing warehouse. And I must say, our volunteer team is so completely responsible for organizing and making this record holiday food drive season happen. Now, at this time, I'd like to recognize our retiring school food drive coordinator. This is Cindy Ariel. Cindy has served for 5 years working with all of the school teams across the county who provide this amazing show of food support year in and year out. Over Cindy's tenure, an amazing 101,480 meals have arrived in these yellow barrels, healthy staples that are then sorted and they go out to pantries throughout the year. Thank you, Cindy, and I must say also thank your husband, Alan, because he helps deliver those barrels too. You are a blessing. And we are now blessed to introduce your successor, Jamie Shorter. She is a retired teacher herself. She is uniquely set to carry on this longest serving tradition of the food bank, the holiday and year-round school food drives. The other critical leg of the holiday food drive season comes as we work with local businesses, churches, organizations, and more. Sandy Cameron joined the team in October as the food bank's food drive coordinator, a role she embraced. Over 50 plus countywide food drives were organized and donated from November through January. A shout out to our food bank volunteers, the Noblesville Rotary, and all who kept those yellow barrels moving in and out, and all the sorting teams who just worked tirelessly throughout the holidays. Food drives help us provide more food year-round. Know that Sandy has big plans for the year coming up, so we will continue to fill the barrel. Healthy produce and meat for all goes straight to the crux of our topic tonight. To further this goal, we expanded our staff in 2021 to include Courtney Hopper, our produce coordinator. Produce distributions increased in total by 8%, and distributions from January through May were made available to all food pantries through extensive monthly purchases. This is a practice that we will be continuing in 2022 and beyond. Our 2021 Meeting the Need project with Hamilton County 4-H continued for its 6th consecutive year and broke its previous year record. Total meat distributions for the year increased by 85%. We listened to food pantries' feedbacks and supply healthy purchased portions of chicken, hamburger, sausage, and more. These are tailored to serve the families they assist. Meals for Kids programs, both weekend meals during the school year and summer lunches, are still very critically important during the second year of the pandemic. Countywide summer programs continued to serve over 1,900 school-aged children in 2021. As part of our coordinated effort with programs across the county and school community services, the food bank itself provided 14,300 and plus pounds of fresh and stable foods and monetary support to support the programs throughout the year. Pack the Cruiser, as some of you are familiar with, a partnership with Kroger and all of the local police departments and summer lunch programs, will be back for its 6th year on June the 4th, 2022. And thank you, Janet Guffian, for heading up this critical area of programming. Our amazing partnership with Ivy Tech evolved in 2022. As the newest campus in the Ivy Tech system, the Hamilton County campus is blessed to be expanding its healthcare training, and we, the food bank, have now moved to 597 Westfield Road in Noblesville to our own space. We look forward to sharing this space with the Food Support Network of Hamilton County. We will be offering all of the same healthy perishables as before, and we are excited to see where this next step in the journey takes us. Thank you, Ivy Tech, for hosting us, and thank you to the Riverview Health team as we start this new chapter. Another huge thank you to our Hamilton County community leaders who helped make this transition a reality. To learn more about all of the food bank's programming, distribution, and financial details, I urge you to watch for our 2021 annual report. This will be available very soon on our website and you can learn more about us. You can see how you can help also by either volunteering or sharing of your resources. I must say, I love our food bank team. They are such a blessing every day. Everyone from fellow staff members to Tuesday and Thursday teams to produce and meeting the need teams. You always have my deepest gratitude and thanks. I especially tonight want to thank those retiring food bank board members. You have helped so very much with all of your time and talents, and I must say, you're like family to me. You're the best. God is good in community. While we discuss the goal of healthy food access for all, please know this only starts first and foremost with community. All across Hamilton County, from rural to suburban, elementary kids to octogenarians, all colors, shapes, and sizes, and everyone from caramel to aroma and everywhere in between. We are one community that can work together to meet this goal. The food bank is here. We promise to seek out more ways to serve all of the food support network, and it starts first with hearing from you. We need to hear how the food bank can support these efforts to ensure healthy food access for all. Critical issues such as supply, inclusion, communication, these issues were felt by all of us, near and dear to our hearts during this pandemic, and these tough issues are going to continue. But we remain in this together, and our food support network will continue to grow and evolve with these issues. Most of all, we look forward to working together with all of you. I thank you very much. Next, we will be hearing from Mary Lou Fincham, our board president. She will share more information about the food bank, our board election, but first, we have a video we'd like to share.
So that was just on one of my, well, when I retire, what am I going to do? You know, it was on the list. And I saw a little newspaper article that kids in my neighborhood elementary school, which is 2 blocks up the street from me, were getting weekend meals. And I thought, oh my goodness, there are kids in my neighborhood that are hungry. I'd love to do the weekend meals. And right about that time, the food bank had their annual meeting, so I went to the meeting. I said, hey, I'd like to do this. And they said, well, we don't need anybody for that, but we need people to do this volunteering at the food bank itself. And so I signed up for that, and I've been happy ever since. It's been wonderful. Well, moving to a new place is really hard when you're retired, and it's hard to meet new people, and I'm always so happy to go see my friends on Tuesdays. Because I've worked with volunteers, I know that volunteers live longer, so ta-da, let's, you know.
Oh, I just, you know, there's a lot of people that need help and that are struggling, and, you know, to know that you get some part of that. This is a big organization, a lot of people pitch in, and, you know, I have a small role, but it's still, you know, when you see folks that are struggling, that, you know, we can help out, that's pretty gratifying. People come in on a Thursday to help sort food and load food, and with COVID, we had to cut that way back to where there were 2 or 3 of us. That gave us plenty of space in the warehouse to be able to social distance and wear our masks and not worry about that. And but that meant there were a lot less people to do the sorting and putting stuff away, so it was a little busier. Oh, there's tons of opportunities, and so it doesn't have to be lifting heavy boxes. It could be, we have people that come in and they lift 6, 8, 12-ounce cans and put them in boxes, so it doesn't require, I'm on the other side doing when the box is full, lifting it, putting it away. But we have people that do data entry, we have people that do websites for us, we have people that do a whole bunch of stuff. We have people that do our financial recording, and so we have people that do things that take intelligence, and then we have guys like me. I just lift boxes and drive trucks, and so it works out well.
We saw a large increase from the previous year. I think the aspect of the pandemic brought out different parts of the needs. We had parents that weren't working at home that started working from home, so they were around to maybe provide it, but yet the decrease in their income and the closures caused a greater need to provide foods. So a lot of our programs did see a jump in what their needs were for not only just the kids, but the families themselves. Pack the Cruiser is an exciting event that started 6 years ago. This year, on June 4th, will be the 6th year of it. And it is a partnership between the police and sheriff's departments, the Kroger stores, and the summer feeding programs that come out, and the community has the opportunity to donate food for them or pack the cruiser on a Saturday morning. And the foods that are collected during that time are distributed then to the meal programs throughout the county. Last year there was about, if you look at it, 17,000, I think we had 17,000 pounds and a donation of about $8,000 that was contributed toward those programs. And those programs feed 1,900 kids throughout the community in the summer. And that's every day, Monday through Friday, breakfast and lunches. And then some programs actually prepare meals Monday through Friday, a hot meal. We don't set necessarily the goal, but work to say that we can supply the needs of what those kids are. We don't anticipate that they're going to decrease. And if ever we look to see how the schools can partner as long as with these programs to see what we can do. I just wanted to say that, our partnership with the community and helping everyone in the community, no matter what those needs are, is crucial and vital. And that's where, as the food bank and all our partners looked to be able to meet those needs and make sure that our families don't go hungry.
The job posting for the produce program coordinator opened up. I just knew that was the perfect fit for my interests. Yes, I was pregnant during this time and had just graduated from college, had just gotten married the year before, so it was record in that way, but it was also a record time for the food bank. We increased our donations up to 25,000 pounds last year. We source all of our produce donations from local vendors at the Fishers and Noblesville Farmers Markets. And we have also started purchasing from those local vendors as well. And we also supplement our purchases throughout the year from Kroger and Meijer, but we really like to focus on locally grown, sustainable foods from local vendors. Everything that's going on right now will probably receive a greater increase, but we'll also probably be helping more people within our community because they'll need the extra assistance this upcoming year.
The last 2 years, so we're in year 2, and I finally sort of feel like we're moving beyond it. But we learned a lot. We learned that within our community, it takes a community. We really had to work together, and there was just a lot of supply issues that we dealt with. There was the social distancing issues, but there was just a new thing every day, and it was scary. It was scary for a lot of things. You're watching restaurants shut down, or temporarily or permanently, and car lines became the norm for food pantries, and a lot of those are still going on. So just the whole, what might have happened over a 10, 15, 20-year time period was condensed down, and people were trying to figure out the best ways to make sure that all of the residents of Hamilton County were fed, they were fed nutritious food, and that we were taking care of each other. A lot of the food pantries, we have all sizes of food pantries and meal programs all across Hamilton County, and some have sources to purchase meat, some do not, some have limited budgets, medium budgets, but
To make sure that protein is available in families' diets, we have taken it upon as a food bank mission to increase that and make it a staple for families throughout the year. So we started 70 years ago with the 4-H Meeting the Need project, and that has grown. We had our biggest year for that last year. So we purchased those beef and dairy steers and hogs from those 4-H members who have taken on that project, and the 4-H members are very excited to work with us, and so that they kind of feel that, you know, that their animal that they've spent a lot of time on is doing good. And we'll continue that here in 2022, but now meat distributions are fully year-round. 18,000 pounds of meat were distributed in last year, and that number will only go up. So 2022, our main goal is we do once a month meat distributions, or once a quarter, but we want to increase that. People don't eat meat just once a month. I mean, so we need to get with it, and we're gonna need the community's help.
Good evening. I'm Mary Lou Fincham, the current board president of Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank. Thank you for being here tonight. That was some of the highlights of some of the programs of some of our volunteers and staff. Wasn't it great? As you can see, we are meeting the need by doing all that we can. But this is not just a slogan or a tagline for us. This is what we believe should happen on a daily basis, not just for the food bank, but in our personal lives. Our food bank board and staff are amazing people, along with the volunteers who are the heart of our organization. And among our 13-person roster of board members and staff, we have 10 mothers, 3 fathers, 6 realtors, 8 small business owners, 5 teachers, an engineer, a commercial banker, a lab scientist, a recent college grad, a personal trainer, a worldwide entrepreneur, a law student, a former Colts cheerleader, and we are all people of faith. We range in age from 20-something to well-seasoned grandparents. We have a former food bank intern, 8 who came to us through their local pantry, a pastor's wife. Some of us used to be on food stamps. Some come from farms or small towns, some from big cities, some locally, some from other states. We have those who are involved in their church, in professional organizations, in civic organizations, in chambers of commerce all across the county, and so much more. In short, they are leading lives that show they care. They are invested in their community and in Hamilton County's future. The food bank has been around since 2009, and in that short amount of time, we have seen huge cultural shifts in the diversity of local communities. We are looking to reflect that in our volunteer base. You could never imagine this wide range of diversity in our small group, but that just proves that diversity is wider than your age or how you look. It's who you are and what you believe. We are looking for more people who live lives that show they care. We are seeking those who can give of their time, their talents, and their treasure. We are seeking the future leaders of Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank. We are seeking you. You may leave a comment in the chat if you would like to have someone contact you personally about opportunities available with us. Or you may go to hchfoodbank.org to see what difference your talents can make. You can volunteer your time under the volunteer tab, or make a meaningful monetary donation securely online right there, right after our time together tonight. We do have some business to take care of this evening, and that is to make sure that we do have our leaders in place for our next term. So now it is my honor to present the slate of candidates for the board of directors who will lead us into the future. We have 2 members up for re-election. Bob Kilmer, finishing his first term on the board and has coordinated the motorcycle ride for us for the last 3 years. And Gary Baird, finishing up his term with us. He's our man on the street for farmers market gleaning and has previously run his church's pantry along with his wife, Alicia. Next, we have 3 candidates for election. Angie Wolf is a nurse, a grant writer, and has extraordinary organizational powers. Previously on our board, she set into motion our volunteer onboarding process. Next, we have Monica Dorsey, a mother, former teacher, and currently the insurance lady. Monica has a passion for equity and education and providing stable environments for young students. Our last candidate is Brad Lewis, by trade an environmental scientist, also a longtime resident of Hamilton County, a husband, father of 2, and outdoorsman. Brad has become aware of the food bank by helping his church group distribute the fresh meat on the Pantry Day of Meeting the Need. Thank you to each of these for answering the call to serve. Being that we are in the cyber age, we will vote on the chat line by entering yes for accepting the slate of candidates as presented or no for denying the slate. The votes will be filed from the recording of the meeting, so please submit your vote now. Before I introduce our next speaker, we have some people we'd like to recognize and thank for their service to our organization. Kathleen Connelly is officially leaving us this year. She has been our nutrition counselor for the last 3 years. Kathleen helped make us aware and helped us develop strategies for implementing healthier options all across our offerings to pantries and programs, including lower salt options, higher fiber options, packed and natural juice options, and gluten-free when available. Kathleen helped us turn the corner to better nutrition and many other things, and for these, we say thank you. Next, our secretary, Carol Hopp. Carol has been with the food bank for over 7 years and stepped up at a crucial time to be our secretary. If you have ever received a handwritten note from us, it was Carol's lovely penmanship and heartfelt sentiments expressed there. We understand her desire to move on, as she and her husband Larry have many grandchildren scattered around the US and want to go and make memories with them. To these 2 lovely ladies, we say, don't be strangers. There's plenty of work to do. And when you guys see them out on the street, say thank you. Now we come to the portion of the program that we've all been looking forward to hearing. It is my privilege to introduce our first speaker of the night, the president of Hamilton County Community Foundation, Tom Killian.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and stand up here. Super excited that we're able to have everybody out to the hub this evening that was able to come. I think we have about, 38 of you online, so it's great to see such a fabulous crowd listening in on such an important conversation this evening. Really impressed with the numbers that both of you talked about this evening and what's happening here in Hamilton County. My name is Tom Killian. I'm the president of the Hamilton County Community Foundation, also president of Impact Central Indiana. Impact Central Indiana supports our foundation by facilitating social impact investments throughout Central Indiana. We are coming to you live tonight from the Hamilton County Collaboration Hub. As a quick pitch to this facility, this is a facility for our not-for-profits throughout Hamilton County to utilize this, whether it be for events, co-working, programming, you name it. This is your facility. Please, if you have not, come check it out. 3 years ago, the Hamilton County Community Foundation changed its mission. And for the first time, we launched a comprehensive strategic plan throughout Hamilton County. And at the foundation, we believe that every individual throughout Hamilton County should have equitable opportunity to reach their full potential, no matter their place, their race, or their identity. Food insecurity is a huge piece of that for us at the foundation. Our 3 pillars that we focus on are mental health, family and youth empowerment, and inclusive economic growth. And it's in that family and youth empowerment that we have a deep focus on food insecurity throughout the county. For years, wasn't just the last 3 years, for years, the foundation has focused on food insecurity. And as a grants committee, probably about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we started having a very real discussion about what the role is for the community foundation when we're talking about food insecurity. And ultimately, through the generosity of the Lilly Endowment, we had the opportunity to contract with Lena Hackett and her team at Community Solutions to dig a bit deeper, to understand how do we need to be thinking about food insecurity as a community? And really, what should the Community Foundation be doing to support all of you and your different networks throughout the county when it comes to food insecurity? And so in just a moment, we're going to get to hear from Lena. The report that she's been able to put together is phenomenal. I will tell you that for me, there's 4 takeaways in this report. And Lena, I hope I'm not stealing any of your goods here, but I think it's really important to intro this food plan with these 4 key takeaways for us as a community. 1, every resident in Hamilton County needs to have access to food resources regardless of where they live and how often they need help. 2, food resources need to be provided with attention to language barriers and to cultural norms and preferences. 3, food resources need to be provided in a way that minimizes stigma. And the last being, there are long-term policy issues that need to be in place to fully address food insecurity at a systemic level, and they must be pursued. So with that, thank you. I'd love to turn it over to Lena to jump into our plan.
Great, thank you, Tom. And I was quickly writing down the 4 takeaways, so make sure that I think we're going to add about 3 or 4 more to them. So first, let me express my appreciation for the invitation to come here tonight. The work that we did with so many people in Hamilton County resulted in this plan was really very personal and very heartwarming, because what is absolutely true is Hamilton County cares about this issue, and they care about it across many sectors, across individuals, and lots of people gave us their time and spoke with us every time we asked. I do want to note that my colleague on this, Tracy Kruger, is also here on the call. And so if there's anything I can't answer, Tracy will jump right in. But I also want to make sure to acknowledge her and thank her for this work, because as Tom alluded to, there isn't an easy answer for food insecurity. There is not one thing that one person can do that's going to solve it. There's not one thing that a community can do to solve it. It takes many approaches, consistent approaches, sometimes figuring out what worked and what didn't work and coming back to it. But it is a priority clearly for the foundation, and most importantly, it was clear it was a priority for all of Hamilton County. So I'm going to share my screen here in a second, and what I want to do is go through really the process that got us to where we are with that plan, because it is a reflection of everything we heard and saw, and it's a reflection of groups of people coming together and sharing their brain power. And then at the end, talk about what are the strategies that came out of it, and then what? Because I think, we may all be familiar with plans that get done and they look really pretty and they sit on a shelf somewhere, and that's not this. So we want to be really clear about next steps, which is really where all the excitement is. So I am now going to share my screen. And are you seeing it? Because once I share it, I can't see you guys. So.
Yes.
And you still just see the 1, not the 2.
No, we see the 2.
All right. Now where are you? Just the 1?
Just the way you like.
Absolutely great. So yes, as everyone alluded to, we were first invited into Hamilton County to talk about food insecurity. And food insecurity is a huge issue, and more than we could do, certainly in this time that we had. And so we started to look at the issue of where do we start? Where do we start nibbling around the edges? And what became clear is, while we're figuring out all of the policy issues to address food insecurity on a long-term systemic level, people are hungry and people need access to food. And we need to make sure we're doing that first. We framed this in what we call a results framework, because if you don't, I think we've heard, if you don't know where you're going, you don't know if you got there. So the goal here is that every resident in Hamilton County has healthy food. And this isn't just the goal of the Community Foundation and their strategic plan. It became the goal of the group of folks who were working with us to help develop this. And it is a population level result because we want this for every resident. We couldn't think of any type of resident we did not want this result for. So this is the goal. How do we make progress towards this? One of the first things we did was work to define what food insecurity looks like in Hamilton County. And we did that by doing a fairly deep dive into some data that I'm going to show you in a moment. This data is what we call best available data. There are some things that are really easy to measure because they're very black and white and they're collected in a computer system somewhere and you spit out a report. Food insecurity doesn't really do that. So we started to look at what data do we have that gives us a good picture of what's happening in Hamilton County. And then we augmented that with surveys, with personal interviews, one-on-one, with focus groups, speaking with people who are coming to the food banks and the food pantries to really augment that data. But let's take a little bit of a walk through what we do know. And this is all going to be what I'm going to show you on paper, and I think probably what you experience every day in your work in a pantry. So what we know, and probably what you've heard, is if anybody would say that Hamilton County has an issue with food insecurity and an issue with poverty, that would be difficult to believe because Hamilton County doesn't have that kind of reputation in Indiana. But in the video that you saw, the very first woman who spoke talked about how what she discovered was food insecurity was simply down the road from her. One of the things with Hamilton County is that while the county as the whole, if you lump all of the data together, really seems to be doing quite well, when you start to look at all of the different cities and towns that make up Hamilton County, the story gets a little bit different. I think, clearly Carmel, Fishers, Noblesville, and Westfield are the primary cities in Hamilton County. But then we also then have Cicero, Sheridan, and Arcadia. So we made sure that we gathered data across all of those cities so that we could see what is happening in our most populated cities and what is happening in maybe our more rural, less populated cities. But just to kind of go through this list, so Hamilton County has diversity. 8% of the residents are immigrants and foreign born. Almost 10% speak an English other than language, speak a language other than English in their homes. You have a significant percentage of residents who are under 18 years old and over 65. And those are some very fragile times on both ends of the life spectrum. As we're able to do this virtual meeting, we know that vast majority of the households do have internet and the vast majority of households have a computer. But we also know that the average travel time to get to work is 25 minutes. That travel time alludes to transportation issues, which we will get into it in a little bit. And we also know that 21% of working adults reported not earning enough to afford essential resources for their families. 1 in 4 adults in Hamilton County are obese, and 3% of the households received food stamps in 2020. And that's an important indicator just of what the need is. Well, I didn't go anywhere, did I? There we go. When we look at what the race and ethnicity of Hamilton County, primarily white, 86% of the population is white, and primarily not Hispanic, with just 4% of the population being Hispanic. When we think of what Tom had talked about in terms of one of the takeaways being addressing that language barrier, it can be easy to overlook that because the majority of folks who are coming in your doors don't have a language barrier. But what that means is it's going to take some intentional effort. Talked a little bit about your towns, largest to smallest, your towns and your cities. So between Carmel, Fishers, and Noblesville, so 30, 58, 78% of the folks live in those three cities. What that then indicates is that's where the resources go to, because that's where your population lives. So what we found, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is because that's where resources are, those resources don't include just shopping malls and grocery stores and entertainment venues, but also social service organizations, food pantries, and other services that support families tend to be in these more populated cities. When we look at the families with children, Hamilton County ranked number 4 among Indiana counties for the highest number of preschool aged kids. And this is a strong indication of the need to make sure that these kids, because they are a vast majority of your population, are getting the food that they need, which leads to the schools being a very strategic partner. 15% of these kids in Hamilton County are receiving a free or reduced price lunch. That number has probably, notice that number is a 2019-2020 school year. While there was a dip then because of COVID, what we've seen pretty much in every county across Indiana is then there has been an escalation of it. 5.3% of the Hamilton County children under 18 lived in poverty during 2019. And again, we know that that number has probably only grown. The graphs on the side are a demonstration of what's happening in terms of TANF. In the way back days, we used to call this welfare. This is TANF. So this is purely an indication of poverty when you look at how many kids, how many one-parent families, and how many two-parent families in Hamilton County are needing to access TANF. Of all of the folks who are receiving food stamps in Hamilton County, that's 3% of your residents. That ranks 16th highest in need across the counties. 92 counties, and Hamilton County is ranked 16th in terms of food stamp recipients. Referring back to the TANF, you ranked 19th highest in need across the 92 Indiana counties. And I'm going to keep coming back to, these needs have increased as a result of COVID. And as we're hopefully eking our way out of COVID, this is going to linger though for these families. So if that's what we're looking at in terms of the population that needs to be served, what do we know about where the resources are that serve folks? So this map that you see was generated by an entity called Savvy. So Savvy is a research-based entity that's really associated with IU and can tell you a lot of data about a lot of counties on a lot of issues. So we looked at the Hamilton County Community Profile, and what it was able to show us is where they have record of pantries existing. And this is where I want to remind you, looking at best available data. So I don't want to say that this is every pantry that exists in Hamilton County, because there will be some that just simply weren't in Savvy's database. But this is where they are tending to locate. When we had our first group meeting, while folks were adding some dots to this, one of the things to notice about this is there are far more resources on the southern end of Hamilton County than there are on the northern end of Hamilton County. So as you go north in Hamilton County, it becomes less populated, a little more rural. The need is still there, but the resources, it's a longer drive to the resources, and the accessibility needs to be an issue that is addressed. we augmented this with our interviews, and what we heard from clients that we interviewed is that as much as pantry providers try to be open when the need is there, in the evenings and on the weekends when people can get there, there are some barriers with some pantry hours based on when are people off of work and when can they get to a pantry. Transportation is an issue, and the cultural divides that Tom referred to earlier do exist. We did do a survey we sent a survey out to the pantry list, and we also then pulled some data from the surveys that Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank does. You'll notice there's a little thing in the corner, the N equals 31 in this graph about the locations in the townships. So 31 is not a huge response. But this is what we learned from that is that according to the folks who responded to this survey, the majority of pantry locations are looking like they're in these townships. And then the populations being served really is exactly who needs to be served. We have the elderly, families with children, single adults, and veterans. But where does the food come from? You know, as we were watching the video from the food bank, Anita talked about the food that is purchased and why food needs to be purchased to fill those gaps in terms of what's available. So where does the food come from? When we surveyed food banks, the food pantries, the majority of it comes from a food bank, either Gleaners or Midwest or Hamilton Harvest. An equal amount comes from donations, but then a quarter of the food that is distributed has to be purchased. And in most cases, those pantries are purchasing it themselves rather than this being something that they're getting from the food bank because the food bank purchased it. So this was all of the data. And for us, we try to root everything that a community is going to think about in terms of the data that they have. What we often find is that people, they just know because of their experience. They know because of who they're serving in their food pantries. They know or feel like they know what's happening because of their own personal experience doing the work that they do. So we took that data and we knew it wasn't complete. It never is, again, best available data, and it didn't tell the whole story. So that's when we then layered in individual interviews. We did over 30 individual interviews. We did 4 focus groups with people who were being served at a pantry at that time. We then tried to really reach out to people who are very key in delivering food to individuals, schools. For instance, we reached out to them and then just had a conversation just with school partners. And then we also then convened a conversation with everyone with the food pantries, invited all the pantries on the list, and we had a really good showing. And I want to appreciate the time people gave. In those, we talked about some of the data that we saw, but we were most interested in knowing what were they seeing. And this is where we got to by bringing together the data, and so the quantitative data that we had and the qualitative data we were able to get from talking with folks like you. I don't think any of this is going to be a surprise to any of you. So if there's a big aha here, I'll be surprised because again, you live this every day. Transportation is a significant unmet need for clients, and that was identified by food pantries. People need to be able to get to where the food is, and that's just not always possible, both on the north and the south ends of Hamilton County, but primarily there on the north end. Because we looked at the schedule of when pantries are open, and they're technically open to all county residents. And while I think some pantries have written down rules of who they serve and who they don't serve, our observation is that those are words on paper, and when families show up or individuals show up, they're served. But families have to be able to get there. Some pantries found that they needed to limit quantities and how often people could come. And this was purely for the reason of making sure they had enough to meet the need that was showing up at their door. We also then discovered there were very few SNAP retail options available in these rural areas. So in addition to not being able to get to a pantry, there's very few places that if someone is on food stamps, that they are able to spend their food stamp vouchers. Mostly in our focus groups and in our interviews, what we asked was, so, what are the barriers and the gaps that you're seeing? Pantries were struggling with getting enough volunteers, struggling with having enough funding to buy all the food that they would want to buy. Capacity challenges, either because they didn't have the dry storage space or the freezer space, or to store the food that they could get. We also heard from clients that there's some hesitancy on clients that maybe it's just not going to continue. Maybe the one time they show up at the pantry, they will receive food, and the next time they won't, because the pantry has had to adjust their hours or not have enough volunteers. And then we also heard that from some of the pantry workers, that there's just not enough fill in the blank food, sometimes protein, fresh produce, to meet the demand of the families that they're seeing. Stigma. Tom talked about this. Many of the families that are showing up for food are working poor folks. And when we talked with them, there was an embarrassment or a shame associated with needing to ask for help. As we pushed a little deeper on that, one of the statements we heard that a couple of times is that food pantries were for people who really needed them and who were really in need of help, and that's not really us. So the generosity of that in terms of wanting to reserve resources for people who really needed it, and the reluctance to acknowledge that about themselves, really made it difficult for some folks to show up. They never really equated that very strongly with the service they were receiving. However, when we interviewed some pantry providers, some volunteers, at times they would feel uncomfortable because they didn't know if they were providing the service that needed to be provided. And then again, in this bottom bullet point, folks also mentioned that they were hesitant to show up for pantries that were not in their home community. So if they had to travel to a pantry and they were in a city or a town they were familiar with, it just really increased their discomfort. And then knowledge of resources. People don't know what they don't know. So many people who qualified for SNAP benefits didn't realize it and don't know where to go for help. So we did a quick little screening of just the food pantry clients that we talked to, and I think 43% of them would have qualified for SNAP benefits based on just a general, look at their income. They didn't realize it. And then when we talked a little more about it, there was a very lack of knowledge about how you get those and how you use those. Knowledge of resources also was that as many times as there is the community app, that there is the list that the food bank puts out, people are still saying that they have a hard time finding a centralized place to access food. And I know that's a hard one to hear because I can attest from all the conversations I've had with you, it's not because you're not putting the information out, and so I think this is more about how that never ends. Putting the information out, making sure it's correct, making sure it is as specific as possible and as relatable as possible in as many languages as possible is a lifelong journey in something like this. You're never going to be done. When we talked with some of the small food pantry staffs, primarily that are run with volunteers, we asked them, what do you do when folks show up for help? If they need something else, if they need connected to housing, if they also don't have their utilities, are you able to connect them to other services? In the larger pantries, the answer to that was more frequently yes than in the smaller pantries. And with volunteers being a little unsure where to send people next and having a reluctance to send them somewhere that they weren't confident was going to be open and available to them. So this knowledge of resources isn't just about knowledge of food resources, it's also about knowledge of community resources. So then what did we do? So now we have all of this data. that we talked about earlier. We've had interviews, we've had focus groups, we've convened school people, we've convened pantry people. And you know, the technical term for what we did with that is we put it all in the bucket and presented it all and started to figure out, what does this all mean for what's happening in Hamilton County and what we could do. So this was then when people started to really dive into the data, talk about the data, and talk about what that data meant to them. And in these rooms having these conversations were representatives of the food bank, there were some pantry providers, there were some school representatives, there were some folks that worked with community gardens and farmers markets. And we had 3 group sessions, October, November, and January. In the very first one, we just really focused on data, and we had it plastered up in that very collaborative space that is hosting you here today. We had that data posted all around the walls, and literally people walked around it, talked about what it meant, poked at it, asked questions, criticized it in sometimes, to start to really want to make this plan based in what the data was, either qualitative or quantitative. After they did that, they also then talked about, well, who else needs to be at this table other than the people who are here right now? So at that point, they even identified more partners, and we grew the group even larger. In November, people reconvened. They reviewed what they knew about the data, and that's when they started to really think about, what could we do? What would it, if we said we had a strong system of food resources for anyone in Hamilton County who needs them, what does that look like? What does that look like? And if we're going to get there, what's the priority? Because you can't do everything at once. And in that session, people literally got in front of big pieces of paper and began to develop what kind of strategies and action plans they felt like could happen in Hamilton County. We then left from that session and went to session 3 in January, where what the participants were facing was fleshed out strategy grids with, here's what we want to do and here's how we're going to do it. And again, they reviewed it, they poked at it, they criticized it, they added to, they took away, they prioritized. So then walking out of that January session, we really had the infrastructure for the collaborative action plan. And these were the priorities. What we knew from the pantries is they needed to have access to stable sources of food so that they were not worried about whether they had enough meat or enough produce, that they were, and it wasn't dependent on how much storage space they have, how big they were or how little they were. How do we make sure that all of the pantries have stable sources of food? The next priority is, it's one thing for pantries to have stable sources of food, but what we also then need on the other end to make sure is that people can access that food, regardless of race, place, or identity, regardless of whether they live in the northern part of the county or the southern part of the county, regardless of whether they speak another language or have another culture or need a different kind of food. That food needs to be something they can get to fairly easily. And then there was a conversation about, so what's that next step? You have a population of people who are coming to you because they have a need. And if they have a need for food, they probably have needs across other parts of their lives. And so how do we equip the pantries to connect clients to that next step of services? How can we do that without expecting every person who works in a pantry to be an expert at that? So walking out of that third meeting, these were the priorities that the group was really focused on, knowing that there were 50 other things that could be done as well, but this is where they wanted to start. And then we have the Hamilton County Food Resource Community Plan. And this plan is going to be available for you to connect to. I'm sure it'll be on the Community Foundation's website and you'll be able to read it in some detail. But I want to walk through it just in general. And as I do this, as this plan gets implemented, what people will be presented with who are going to be doing the work is, here is the best objective strategy action plan that the group's come up with so far. But you as a work group are going to be doing this. So add to it, take away. This is a living, breathing plan. In order to do that, all of this work has to come together. So the very first strategy is, once Community Solutions has left the building, how does this all get held? And so the recommendation is the development of the Hamilton County Food Resource Coalition. And the purpose of that coalition is where all the work will come together, where it will leverage each other, and where folks will be able to measure what kind of progress they're making. The second objective was to begin to implement strategies to ensure pantries have the food that they need for individuals and families. Under this came things like we knew from the conversations that not everyone can access Gleaner's Food Bank or wants to access Gleaner's Food Bank. And why is that? How could folks, what could be done there? So a strategy under that objective is, let's not just say, not everybody wants to access Gleaner's Food Bank. Let's figure that out. Let's figure out how folks who can or want to can do it. Let's figure out how we make sure that there's a system for people who have smaller refrigeration storage or smaller shelves to hold food, that they're able to get the food they need at the rate and frequency they need. So let's start to pull apart what's really happening and implement those strategies. And then again, so can we make sure that individuals can access the food they need? The strategies that came out under this objective were not just about, let's make sure we can get somebody there by, providing transportation. It was also about, how can we get to food to where they are? What kind of mobile pantry systems exist? There was some creative thinking about, well, who is out there in all of those rural areas that could drop off food? What are, ambulances doing? What are school buses doing? And so those were that's the kind of brainstorming that was coming across about making sure that individuals and families can get the food they need. And then lastly, as I had said, how can we make sure that people can connect to that next step that might ensure that they're on their road to self-sufficiency and, can stop having a need for a community food resource. So what now? We have some really great strategy grids with some really great objectives, strategies, action plans, but it's not going to be a plan that sits on the shelf. So as we move forward, this is what we're going to be doing. And for the next couple of months, we're going to develop the infrastructure of the coalition. Who holds it, who runs it, who convenes it, and how do people who are members of it hold each other accountable? Let's establish work groups focused on each one of those areas. Each objective gets its own work group, and we invite people to be a part of that work group to move that work forward. We're not asking people to be part of a work group to tell somebody else how to move it forward. This is all about moving to action. Then we're going to recruit partners. I can pretty much promise you'll be getting an invitation to join this work. We're going to recruit you, we're going to orient you, and then we're going to launch. And the goal is that by the end of April, which is just a few steps away, we will have launched this initiative. We will have launched these work groups. And it can sound like a very complicated thing to do, and it's just really not. It's about putting a structure around it and holding that structure. So we could see, as you see along the bottom here, I know it's kind of small, there'll be a work group that focuses on ensuring pantries have access to the food they need. There'll be a work group that's focused on ensuring people can access that food regardless of race, place, or identity. There'll be a work group on how can we make sure that school-age youth and their families can access food. And finally, there'll be a work group on how do we get folks connected to community resources. And then the question for all of those work groups is, who needs to be in them? Who's connected to this? Who has a sphere of influence to move this forward? And who really cares about this? And that is where we're going to be moving forward with the Hamilton County Community Plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lena. My name is Gina Siley. I am the Community Leadership Officer here at Hamilton County Community Foundation. And I've been so lucky to be able to work alongside Lena this past year in really digging into the data, holding those community sessions here at the Collaboration Hub, and creating this community action plan that you guys all got to get a preview of today. So again, next steps are that those that are interested in participating in those 4 work group sessions will be getting an invitation to join. If you do not get an invitation, please do reach out to me, and I am happy to assign you to the work that is to come, because there's certainly plenty of it. And we're just really excited to have Lena and her team alongside us a couple more weeks to get us to that launch point in the end of April 2022. And just so grateful to Anita and her team at Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank for really coming alongside us as well, alongside Nancy Chance at Good Samaritan Network. Really the 3 entities between the foundation, Good Samaritan Network, and Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank have really brainstormed a lot. We even just met this past week to really dig into who's going to be on that steering committee and who's participated in the various planning sessions that could be on those various work groups that you saw. So lots of exciting work to come, and we're just so grateful again to Lena and her team at Community Solutions for digging into this with us, recognizing that, you know, we had this issue that we really wanted to address up here in Hamilton County, and creating this beautiful plan for us. So we're very, very excited. Let's kick it off to some questions, because I know we have quite a few that were submitted before tonight's event, and I'm sure there are many online that are also very eager to submit some questions.
So if you are online and you have a question for us, you can put it in the chat. I'm looking at the chat right now. Or you should also feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, just in case you didn't hear me, if you have questions for us tonight, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them yourselves, or if you prefer, if you put them in the chat. I'm watching the chat now, so we'd appreciate your questions. We do have a couple of questions that were submitted before the meeting tonight, and I think this is one that I would like to present to Lena. Lena, how would a young person help the community end hunger?
I think there's ending hunger is huge. So I think there are small things and big things. Probably the most important thing is for young people to really educate themselves on the issue. Having some hands-on experience working in a pantry, working in a food bank, delivering the school meals, that's helpful. But if we're ending hunger, then the ask we're going to have of young people is going to be a little bit more than that. I mean, you have to think about why are people hungry, and it's a much more complicated issue that's going to require policy change. It's going to require advocacy, and that's really where we want the young person's voice and passion and energy to be.
Thank you for that, Lena. And this one's for you, Anita. How can we attract more food pantry thrift store volunteers?
That is an issue that we heard from Lena that is really critical. And it's also a timely issue as we come out of COVID, but I think we need to move through this carefully. Just seek out those people who want to help. Make it very easy for people to volunteer. Be very welcoming. We ourselves at the food bank, we're the same boat as everyone else, trying to make opportunities available, but educate those volunteers as they come to your door. Don't just say, here is food to sort. I mean, educate those about what we've learned tonight about what food insecurity really looks like in Hamilton County, so that they're not just motivated to volunteer once, but they can look beyond those issues and do more.
And one of the things I heard on the video, which was very moving to me, is it is a community. And those volunteers form, I think our little food pantry feels like a family. That connection is so important now, more than ever, that people feel connected to something and like they're making a difference. So now this one for Lena or Anita. What role do community gardens in Hamilton County play in providing healthy food?
I'm gonna let you take first swipe at that, Anita.
The community gardens, I think that's another area where the food resource plan is we can really share, what's going on. Sometimes it's very easy. A community garden's been in place and it's already directly connected to a food pantry close by. But, we get the comment from people who are doing this, how do we donate food? So we need to do a better job of connecting those community gardens that are in place, working with master gardeners, working with churches that have community gardens, but making sure that that wonderful produce we can grow here in Hamilton County has a wonderful place to go. So again, it's just, gathering that information. If you look at Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District, they have a website as to where you can donate produce. I know the Fishers Agri Park, Good Samaritan Network works with them. So, again, just making those community resources completely available.
And my next question is for you, Lena. Can you give us some information on demographics, numbers, and statistics?
So we did walk through those a little bit in this presentation, and I will say when when and if you download the plan and the needs assessment, all of that is available through that. What I think what maybe our aha was walking into Hamilton County is the difference across the county from north to south demographically is really striking. And I think that's an opportunity, and we heard it in the group sessions in terms of raising an awareness of this. We started to hear a lot from the bigger pantries in the south end of Hamilton County about what they could do to move their food forward once they saw the demographics and they saw the need. It was just something, they're busy doing their work. They're not lifting their head up to study the data as we had the opportunity to do. So hopefully you'll be able to access those resources, and they don't change frequently. So if you have 2019 data, don't feel like you're behind the ball if you don't have 2021 data. It just doesn't shift that fast. So go with your best available data.
And I just want to add from the foundation's perspective, if you need access to this countywide plan, we do have it linked to our website. If you go to hamiltoncountycommunityfoundation.org, click under About Us and our vision, we do have a link directly to this plan if you want to dig into those numbers further.
Thank you very much, Gina and Lena. So now this one is for Tom and Gina. Does HCCF see their role evolving in light of the lessons learned from the pandemic in regards to ensuring food security for all?
I can kick that off and then I'll throw it over to Gina. I would tell you that at the foundation, we subscribe to this idea of constant evolution and understanding the change in our demographics. Lena presented some current data that essentially shows the fact that, there aren't a lot of Hispanic, or we're still very white as a county. Well, I would tell you as a foundation, we're looking at data 10 years, 15 years, 20 years out. Hamilton County continues to change. We continue to evolve. I'd also kind of bring up the fact, I don't know if anybody's familiar with some Raj Chetty data out there. But then when we start to look at Raj Chetty data that tells us things like this current generation of student will be the first to not out-earn their parents, right? And so we start putting all of these data sets together, and then we build the perfect storm around a pandemic. So I think there's a lot of lessons for us to learn here. What I would tell you though is we don't have all of the answers. At times, I think I ask the staff what the answer is and want to be able to have that answer. To give you an example, the hub that we're sitting in today was designed and created through a feasibility study that happened pre-pandemic. So tonight, we're getting to experience all of the nuances around a hybrid event, right? And we're having to constantly evolve as a foundation to be able to deliver to our constituent base the way we would like to. No different in my mind when it comes to food insecurity in our county. It exposed, I think, a truth. It exposed systems, and it exposed weaknesses that I think we as Hamilton County residents need to be aware of and able to address as we move forward.
And this one is also for you, Tom and Gina. What monetary resources are needed to help the families and the changing demographics of Hamilton County?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to answer that question just from the foundation's perspective. I mean, certainly we see ourselves as a big partner in implementing this plan and ensuring that it is equitable and it reaches all in the community. That really gets back to our mission statement at the foundation, ensuring that there's equitable access for anyone in Hamilton County to reach their full potential, regardless of race, place, or identity. And that absolutely includes food insecurity. And again, as Tom pointed out, that issue exponentially increased during the pandemic. So on the back end, of course, from the foundation's perspective, we've got an increase in requests for monetary contributions and other ways that we can help support the community in addressing this need that has exponentially increased. So I say that just to let you all know that we are a part of this implementation plan for this countywide action plan. We will be at the table with Anita and the Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank and other partners, really to dig into this work, to contribute where we can monetarily, to contribute where we can from an expertise perspective, a community convening perspective. I think there's a lot of ways that we contribute to this work outside of just monetary, but certainly we are at the table from that funding perspective, of course.
Well, Anita gave me this.
If I could just
Sure, go ahead,
add to that,
Anita.
I'm sorry. This plan was developed both thinking about what kind of funding needs to happen, but not based in that. If we always wait for money before we solve problems, we'll be frozen and problems won't get solved. So as you look at this plan, you're going to see a lot of opportunity for no cost, low cost ideas and strategies where people just start to do their work a little differently to get to a greater impact. So that while I will never deny that funding is a great thing to have, if we wait for it, we'll be frozen.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Gina. So the next question is, what does the typical client pick up at the pantry? And I am at least one of your resident food pantry volunteers, and it's a job I dearly love. And that is a very diverse answer. So during the pandemic, we had to take our clients, our visitors, from shopping on their own to get what they wanted to giving them pre-boxed food just to keep everything safe. And we realized that that might lead to food being wasted. So we hope someday very soon to get back to having our clients come in and shop for their own food. But we've got people with special health issues, people with dental issues, people with children that have gluten allergies, peanut allergies, etc. We have one older gentleman that says, take all the canned goods out, I want dairy only. And we try to accommodate that the best we can. So I would tell you that our goal is that everybody is able to shop for food that they want, that suits their dietary needs, and that we hope to get back to that really soon post-pandemic. Does anybody else want to comment on the chat who might work at a pantry, or anybody here want to add to that? Okay, and here's my next question. I don't know how to answer this. You all are going to have to help me. How many pantries does the typical client visit? And I have never asked them that. So does anybody know? Lena, do you know?
I'll take this is not an answer, but that question comes up quite often when you're in a group of people who work in the pantries and all across the county. You know, sometimes it has a negative context, like why do people go to so many pantries? And it should not have a negative context. So many of the pantries, you know, if whatever the Food Support Network can do to help families have a stable environment, and if that means going to multiple pantries, that's what's needed. Maybe the ultimate answer down the road is you can, you can get everything you need at one pantry, but then not go to others. I don't know the answer. I think that's one of the things that will really be good as we delve into this, just what is going to be the best answer for the people we serve? So, reframing that question is to how do we serve families and children the best?
Anita, I think it's interesting how you reframed that a bit. And I will tell you, it's a question that we as a foundation get all the time. We talk about it as a grants review committee all the time. We recognize that our pantries don't necessarily communicate maybe the way we would all like them to, or there's not a system-wide network, right, that connects our pantries. The bigger question for me, and I agree with your comment that what are we doing to serve our families is the number one important question there. But I'd also like to understand the why. And part of this plan, part of my understanding of where we're trying to drive is why would a family need to visit multiple pantries? And then we can then determine, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Right now, I'm not sure I have the data or the information to be able to answer a question like that or place judgment on said question. But I think it's really important that as a network, as a community, we understand why that's happening.
Thank you very much. This is for everybody, so I'm watching the chat. Everybody weigh in on this one. What are some of the common misconceptions about food insecurity in Hamilton County? Anybody want to start off on that discussion? Laura McNamara says that it does not exist. Yes, I agree, Laura. They think we're a rich county and we don't have need here. Absolutely. Anybody else?
I think part of one of the misconceptions is that because we are ranked as the wealthiest county, in the state, that we do not have families that have a need. So I think that we don't fully understand our income of what our family resources are, and that we shouldn't have a need because of what our median income is at. That doesn't account for everyone that's working.
Yes.
Living in the county.
Thank you, Janet. And from Brad Lewis, that it is the unemployed. And then also from, I've got one more comment here, which I'm going to get to in just a second. From Melania. Melania said, hold on, Melania, I'll find it. Oops. That people must not be working, and that is why they have to go to the pantry. And Katie said that people who need help are trying to take advantage of the system. I would like to say that one of the things Lena talked about is transportation to food pantries. And I think a lot of the people that we serve in Arcadia, in Jackson Township, if they had transportation, they could get to work. And some of the people that we had during the pandemic had lost not one, not two, but 3 jobs. They were trying to work. So it's just a lot more complicated than they're trying to take advantage of the system where they lost their job. So it is a misconception. Anybody else want to add anything? Anybody else in the room?
I'll just add, I think perception is a big player in this, in terms of, they might perceive that your kid comes to school, they have nice clothes, they have this or that. But what they may not know is that they might be borrowing that to get them to school. They might not have the means to keep the family fed and all of that. So sometimes you can't just judge a book, I guess, basically, by its cover.
And sometimes we see people that will just step into a crack. They lost a job, they haven't started a new job yet, and they just really don't fall into a category where they can get public assistance, but there we are, and that's what we're there for, to fill that gap. So we have also a very large, we historically have had a large Hispanic population visiting us. So I think it's an answer of a lot of different people.
Amy, I would like to add also, like you said, they step in a crack, and literally you can just be one paycheck. So, and then some things are out of your control. So if you have a tornado or hurricane or anything like that, I mean, obviously there are hurricanes here, but if you have an incident of natural disaster and or fire, you've got a real issue, and that's something you didn't foresee, and now you don't even know what step one looks like, especially as it relates to finding.
And I wish people knew that they could come to us and that we would welcome and help them with open arms, because I think sometimes there is some embarrassment, which I wish they would never feel.
From someone that needs more than what they do.
Right. And yeah, absolutely. So the next question, Anita, is for you. How many food pantries are in Hamilton County, and how can we find the one closest to us?
Well, as we shared earlier, so there are over 30-some food pantries, over 40 plus programs, pantries of all shapes and sizes, some that serve the whole general public, some that serve just a specific demographic. How to find them? Watch our website for the Community Compass app. If you would like to get the public distribution, just send an email our way, contact us, and we'll make sure you get the public distribution. And we need to, as what the data in the plan showed us, we need to expand that information. That'll be a lifelong process.
This is one for everybody, so please weigh in on the chat or unmute yourself if you will, and everybody in the room too. What prevents Hamilton County from ensuring that no child is hungry?
I'll share. I mean, I think sometimes it's the communication piece, like we've been talking about all along. There's clearly tools and resources available, and sometimes people just can't find them because they don't know how to look, or maybe it's the child that's going to school that maybe getting the information and the backpack isn't unpacked until after the program or whatever the event is over. There's all kinds of just kind of slight misses that happen, and so I think that's a key player.
And we do have a comment here in the chat from Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. The spreadsheet is a wonderful tool to pass out to clients. And we have an app, don't we now, Anita?
The Community Compass app. Mm-hmm.
So that's easy. As a volunteer, we even have people sometimes pull up with utility bills, or they're living on their uncle's front porch and they don't even have a can opener. So just knowing, how to step in and get them to the right person. Does anybody else have a comment on how we can ensure that no child is hungry? Anybody on the chat?
I would like to add, we haven't talked a lot about it tonight, but I want to do a shout out to all those all around the county who do children's meal programs. Our youth assistance organization all across the county has been very instrumental in that. Fueled for School in Noblesville. White River Christian Church does No Hunger Summer. I mean, they have for years helped neighborhoods in Hamilton County, but these have grown exponentially in the last 3 to 4, 5 years, and we know that's not going to change. So they continue to need to grow, and that's a great, wonderful way. When we said, how does a young person help the community and volunteer? I mean, that could be your place to plug in.
And I'd like to see the food pantries as a resource that the community feels comfortable reaching out to without any kind of embarrassment, that they just know that we're there as a resource. Maybe there's a little bit of a stigma attached that we could help that go away, and the kids would see us and be able to come to us and tell us they need help. The next question is, how many pounds of food are donated annually? What are monetary donations annually, and how has that changed in the last few years? Anita.
Well, this is only speaking for the food bank, and I think as Tom shared earlier, there's, as we work together more as a network of pantries across the country, as a network of the food support agencies, we could have a collective number for that for the county. I can share what the food bank has done for our last fiscal year. A lot of this information will be in our annual report released very soon, but 71,000 plus pounds of food were donated to us in the last fiscal year. We've received monetary donations of $275,000. Is that number higher or lower? That has gone up during the pandemic. The community was very, very generous. We plan to use those resources that have been given us to help those in need.
It was a little bit of a surprise to me to hear that, because sometimes you think you would lose the ability to donate in a time of stress, but yet donations went up. So I think that speaks to the hearts and compassion of the people of Hamilton County. We've got two more questions. Past collaboration efforts have demonstrated reluctance on the part of community partners to commit to a willingness to share quantitative and qualitative data. While client privacy issues are of importance, many entities still often seem territorial in terms of their willingness to collaborate and/or share data and resources. What suggestions would you have in terms of ways to address those issues? Lena, that sounds like a question made for you.
Can you recap it very quickly?
Sure. Basically, how do we, without getting into client privacy issues, get data from entities about what their resources are and what their clients are, so that we can wrap our heads around what needs to be done?
I think there is a role for aggregate data, and we've heard from a lot of folks that wouldn't it be great to know what individuals are going where and when and how, and I would just challenge that question of, do we really, why do we want to know that? If what we want to know can be driven by an aggregate number of 85 people came to the pantry on Wednesday and only 3 came on Friday, that's enough to tell you what you need to do. So I think data is like the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland. You go down it and you always want to know more and more. And I would just always challenge people to think about why and how simple can you make it?
Thank you for that. One more question for you, Lena. The strategic plan offers many excellent objectives for implementation. Recognizing that the partners leading the efforts are all nonprofit and/or governmental funded entities, each with their own limited funding sources and challenges, how would you propose that corporate funding sources be developed to help fund implementation of these objectives?
So I think, in our journey through this with you guys, we certainly discovered some things that don't really need funding, just need a different way of doing something. But we did discover also that some of the folks that we interviewed in the community were corporate leaders and corporate partners who are, interested, and some already participating in this issue. Yeah, I think it's to think about, where is your sphere of influence to bring those partners on board, not just have an ask for them, but bring them into your work group. Bring them into your work group with the expectation that they're going to help you solve this issue. And maybe that's by leveraging, through the chamber or through the community foundation or through, any other business leader. But I think the best way to get corporate involvement is for corporate leaders to be engaged, and for those corporate leaders then to engage their peers.
Thank you for that, Lena, and thank you for a great program tonight. We all learned so much from you. I just have one closing thought, and that is that every person can make a difference. And I believe it behooves all of us to try. Some of us have monetary resources, some of us have time or sweat equity, some of us have the ability to just listen and gather information that will help us help people more. But we all have a gift, we all have a talent. And it doesn't seem right that children and adults in Hamilton County should be hungry when we have such affluence here. So I'm going to ask each of you tonight to think about what could you contribute to this problem in our home, and how can you help us solve it? And I just want to thank everybody here tonight for being here, everybody on the Zoom. Anita, did you want to say anything in closing?
Just thank you for the Community Foundation and for your support in this. Thank you, everyone. I mean, it takes a network, it takes a village, it takes a community. Most of all, it takes a community. Thank you.
Thanks again now. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to end the meeting. If anybody wants to ask any questions, I can stay on the chat for a minute. Anybody? Great program, Laura. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We're signing off now. Bye. I really mean it this time.